Welcome to the Pastor Study here on Smooth 88.1 WHOV iHeartRadio right here, y'all, on Facebook Live. Y'all, this is the last show of 2022. We got almost everybody in. Don't have our sister, Dr. Alvia Lyons, doctor. She's handling some business, so we wish her and her family a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. But we got the rest of the crew that's in. Commonwealth Attorney City of Hampton. We know him as Pastor Law. Anton Bell is with us today. Delegate of the 95th is in the house. Delegate Marcia Price, glad to have you, ma'am. Bishop Ray Johnson of Dominion Outreach, glad to have you, sir. And last but not least, our producer extraordinaire who holds it down, does a great job for us, Jason Covington. Glad to have all of y'all. So, you know, we end the year with just some real talk discussion like we do all year long. But we really want to focus on what stories or what things did we see over the course of 2022 that really stirred us up, right? Really got us going, maybe caught our eye, something we're very passionate about, maybe some things that we want to see better in 2023. And so that's our show for today. If there's anything that you are passionate about, you saw this year, want to see better for next year, drop that in the chat on the Pastor Study Facebook page. Commonwealth Attorney, floor is yours, sir. What caught your eye in 2022? What do you want to see better for 23?
Now, y'all see that's a setup question because they really don't know what I'm going to talk about. But here's the thing. You know, every now and then there's a story that comes up about a pastor doing this and that and that. And we talk about hoes in the pulpit. But I don't want to talk about hoes in the pulpit today.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
We're going to get to that in a few minutes when Jason speaks.
Jesus.
But I don't want to talk about hoes in the pulpit today for my topic. I want to talk about your ordinary hoes in the street. And that's the problem I'm having today, y'all. So, no. We're going to go there. Because we recently, there was recent post on social media concerning how Nick Cannon is feeling guilty that he can't spend sufficient time with his children, his 11 children and one on the way. And social media, they roasted him. And I mean, they said some really bad things. Some of them said, well, then, you know what, pull out if you feel all that guilty. So they said some serious stuff about it. But the problem that just keeps bothering me, there are still people within our community that still thinks it's okay for a person to go around spreading his seed like that in an irresponsible way with all these different baby mamas. It's no way in the world he can have any type of quality time or any type of quality relationship with any one of those children that's not in his home simply because it's not enough time in the day for him to be able to do that. In fact, one guy said something that I found to be very interesting. He said, if I had 11 children by the same woman living in the same house, he said, I would struggle to be able to have quality time with my children. It would be a very hard task to be able to spend quality time and be able to meet the needs that each one of them have for a father, a responsible father, a role model, a hero, a provider, someone who's going to speak into their lives, someone who's going to make sure that they feel safe in their emotions as well as in their physical being. He said it would be hard for me to do all that. So imagine when you got at least 6 or 7 or 8 baby mamas and you up there trying to do that. Money, let me help you. Money does not replace quality time. Money does not replace being there, being present in the moment. Because when one child may be graduating, another child may have a very important soccer game, or someone may have a prom, or someone may have a special day that they just want to have a daddy-daughter date with. And so they don't want to hear the fact that you can't be there because you got to be with this child or that child or that child. And it's not like it's just 1 or 2. It's 11 siblings that you got to compete against. So it's just beyond irresponsible. But the fact that our community still support it. And as we were saying off air, just like there's still women, Black women, sending R. Kelly money to put on his canteen. Now, that's foolishness to me. As many women as he has been convicted of abusing, sexually abusing when they were children, not when they were women, but when they were children, and you sending them money. So I want to talk about the holes in the street. Why we trifling when it comes to how we don't protect our women. We don't stand up for our women. We don't be there and speak out against foolishness against our women. And yes, the women do play a part in the Nick Cannon because they lay down with them. There's no accusation of any type of sexual assault. These are women who laid down with him, so they play a part too. But I'm bothered with this one right this year. This one vexed my spirit.
All right. So Pastor Lawton came out the gate strong, y'all. He talking about not just Nick Cannon. He's talking about the Black community as a whole and how some in the Black community. Could you attribute this to the breakdown of the family unit? Could you attribute this to like it could be a whole number of issues, but see,
it's a whole number of things that's going on in our community. But one of the biggest things, we have lost respect for ourselves. We don't respect ourselves. We don't value ourselves.
Hold that thought, Tom. Hold that thought, because I want to come back to that. I definitely want to come back to that thought. See, I want to ask you, out of respect for you being the only female on the show and you being the only one on the show that's single, you hearing Anton's comments about, the baby mamas with Nick Cannon and then the women supporting R. Kelly and just, we've had these conversations off air about just relationships in general and finding good people, right? So you hearing him say that would give us some perspective from your vantage point as a single Black woman.
Like I keep my head down and I do my work because it's the people that he just mentioned. It's the people going after Meg Thee Stallion, saying that she made up being shot when she's a victim of domestic violence. It's all of this that you see on social media that reminds me that I'm okay by myself. Like it's so hard trying to go through, the mess of things. And I understand, like, we can disagree about certain things. But if you cannot agree on my humanity and respecting my humanity, where do we have to build, from there? And the situations that Tom was talking about when he said the vexed spirit, it perplexes me. Like, I don't understand it. I guess I have spoken with people that are really, really desperate to have children and they may not have viable options. And so if he was supposed to be a sperm donor and the women were just going to go off and have their own lives, but it doesn't sound like that's this situation. So I do want to differentiate between, sperm donation and the Nick Cannon situation. I don't know why we have low self-esteem, but it is really prevalent. And I think I can't speak for all Black women, but what I am witnessing, what we allow to occur. And I was raised to believe that you create the culture with which you wish to participate. And if you allow the disrespect, and if you allow this to be normative without pushing back on it, then that's what you're going to get. And so some of us have just opted out. We've talked about it. Some of us just opted out. It's too much. I don't want to have to deal with all that. Like, I have a good life. I'm cool.
So let me ask you this, Jay, because, you're of the younger generation as well, younger compared to us, Ton and Bishop on the show. Like, we know the relationships have always been challenging at every generation. It just seems like it is more messy than it's ever been. Like, right. So where did that come from? Like, where do you think the messiness at this level? Did social media, in other words, just show us and reveal to us what was already there? Or has it actually gotten worse over time from one generation to the next?
I'm gonna be Bishop Johnson for a moment. It has to be both and. I mean, really, because you can make the argument for both. The argument for social media, because once it goes mainstream, for whatever reason, if it hits social media, then now that's our culture. There's no differentiation, none of that. But I also think because this is a PG show. When I was in school, that a lot of girls, African American girls, there were certain things they didn't do. And as I got older and I got into college, high school and college, now those things became, hey, they did it too, like, other ethnicities. So, I mean, it just didn't start, it was something that was going on for, always. So, I mean, I don't know. For me, I'm going to come back to Jason. I will have to lean more so on the social media side, because the more you see it, the more it gets ingrained into the culture. So I started with both ends, but as I continue to exegete and to get through the agrinuciousness of my answer, I have to divert and say I think social media definitely plays a part into what we're talking about right now.
See, that's interesting. And Ray, I say that that's interesting because, he's saying that social media kind of pushed the button. I think there are two separate things here. One is Jay mentioned, Ray, sexual freedom. Like perhaps maybe younger girls feel more at liberty to be sexually free than perhaps our generation and older. Whether that's true or not, that's what he's saying. But that to me is different than how women are actually being treated, right? Like to me, it's something different here about how there's a freedom to openly disrespect women. That's the part I'm trying to understand, Bishop. Like, where did that come from? Like, because I got a daughter, I got a wife, and I got a mother. And I know, and I had this conversation with my son. I said, we're the only generation, man, that openly calls our women female dogs, and you know the term, and garden tools. Like, why is that? Like, why do we do that to ourselves when no other ethnic group does?
Well, I think it begins with, let me first start by saying this, and that is, I don't think that social media necessarily highlights more or adds to the problem. I think it only narrates what's already been there and kind of hidden underneath the table. So, for example, the three of us, me, you, and Ton, we're all Gen Xers, right? And so I think pretty much all of us here are Gen Xers, and maybe, Jason and Sia are at the cusp, at the tail
I'm a
end
millennial.
of being in Gen X. They're millennials, but really, really close to Gen X as you can get. And I think for us, we grew up with a certain level of standard in terms of our communication with each other, what we could say, what we could not say. And I think that there's been a devaluation of women over time to the point where now it's almost become to the point where it is kosher to communicate the way that the generations behind us communicate. If you said certain things when we were coming along, somebody would slap you in your face, right? But now it is common language, and that has to do with a devaluation and really devaluing who women are and a change in values. And so I think that that is directly tied to the number of eligible men who are available to Black women, which is, now here's my both and side, which is partly structural and systemic, but also on the same side, it has to do with the choices that women are choosing to go after. So you and I, we raising girls, quickly college campus is gone from 12 to 1 to now almost 14 to 15 to 16 to 1, pending what university that you go to. So the boys right now, there is no incentive at all in any way, shape, or form to subscribe to chivalry, to subscribe to, common decency or common courtesy. And so a change in values, I think, is really what I believe to be, quite responsible for where we are in the times and the day in which we live. And so because we don't value human life the same way, we don't have an overall value and appreciation for who we are in human decency. I think all of that plays a part into how we begin to respond to our women. And then the women in today's time are tolerating a whole lot more than they did 25 and 30 years ago. Like I said, somebody would slap you in your face in our day, but that doesn't necessarily happen today.
Yeah, see, I want to come back to that because I do want to ask you, like, it does seem that in this day and time, it's always been to some degree, culturally speaking, that the men, whether it was right or wrong, it was more culturally accepted that men would go off and philander and do all of that, and then the women would stay chaste and virtuous. But it appears now that women are saying, well, if the men are going to do it, I'm going to do it too. But that standard, there's still a double standard in that.
Absolutely.
Right. So if you do it, you're perceived much differently than if a man does it. And it just seems like now everybody is just out there just trying to do what they do. But the rules aren't the same. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely do. First, I do want to push back on this does happen in other cultures. There is a general disrespect for the feminine, period. And I think we are maybe more sensitive to when it happens within our own community. But my Latinx sisters, my white sisters, my Asian sisters, they are reporting the same type of disrespect. So it is probably a global issue. But yeah, I mean, beyond the double standard, I do want to reframe the conversation just a little bit, because whether you're trying to get at me or not, whether you want me in a romantic way or not, I deserve respect. And so it shouldn't matter the ratio, because there's disrespect before you even get to the point of dating. Like just walking down the street, there's disrespect. So, I mean, that includes, just the plethora of different types of people having to coexist in the same space. I may not want you. So why are you hating on me? I'm not in a relationship with you. Why are you being mean to me? But I do want to say that there are specific instances within the double standard where men are rewarded for being like this. Like there are incentives to being a jerk or to being disrespectful. And, in talking with some of my single sisters, there's this resignation of, well, if this is how they're going to act, let me try and at least get the best out of the worst. Or, but again, I mean, I've heard women from older generations, like you said, it was given that the men were going to cheat. And I've heard women from older generations tell younger women, it just is something that you're going to have to deal with. Or not, because I think more of us are identifying ourselves outside of romantic relationships. So we are cool with saying or not, and not living through the disrespect. But I think if you subscribe to your worth as a woman being tied to your relationship with a man, then there might be, putting up with certain things that you may not want to put up with because you tie your identity and your worth to that relationship. And that's what I wonder about some of the women that have had children with Nick Cannon. They're supposed to have children, right? And if you, like I said, if you can't find a viable alternative, Nick supposedly has money. He's supposedly handsome. So he checks off all of these other things, even if he doesn't check off, but he's mine and mine alone. And if you hear them talk about it, they are okay with the situation they're in. They don't feel like they're being oppressed. They don't feel like they're being disrespected. I'm putting my values onto their situation when I say that they are.
Yeah, if you're just tuning in, we're having a good conversation about end of the year things, what has caught our attention over the course of this year. Pastor Law came out swinging, talking about relationships and just how in general we're seeing the dysfunction play out amongst our people. And Todd, I would add to this, and I'm going to go to Sia next, what caught her attention. Put a bow on yours. The reality is, I think that a lot of the things that we're seeing in this generation is a reflection of what they saw privately in our generation.
Oh, absolutely. You had who's it? Jada. What is Will Smith's daughter's name?
Willow.
Willow is I've got the pansexual, and so she I think was on the Red Table, talk that her mother and grandmother and she does. And she basically called her mom out and said, I'm where I am because of what I saw before me all my life. And so it was the relationship that I saw between my father and my mom that began to make me question, is traditional marriage the route I want to go? And for a child to say that to a parent, and for a parent to have to hear that, you have to own some stuff, and you have to say, okay, clearly I did not model what marriage should have been or should have looked like in a positive manner to my child. For her to throw that back in my face and say that to me and say that this is the reason why she rejects marriage, or this is the reason why she really ain't feeling marriage. And so you're right. We got to own some, because here's the thing, we're imperfect people. So, we all got flaws and we all got areas where we absolutely need improvement. However, when the flaws are a level of dysfunctionalism that will cause our children to want to reject what has been the traditional norms of the past, then we really have to say, okay, we need to work on some things.
Yeah, but it's what Jay said. Jay said he thinks that social media and even Bishop is more the issue of revealing what has already been there. And so the difference between their generation and ours, we didn't have social media, but some of the same stuff that they are experiencing, we saw. We just did not have an outlet to share that stuff. And if you look at even today, you ask most young people, can you name 5 couples that you know personally that have a healthy relationship? Most of them can't. So that is the part that we got to own. Before we throw our hands up and say we don't understand the next generation, we can't figure them out, maybe we need to look in the mirror and say, what did we show them? Because what they are amplifying is what they saw and what they have experienced. And maybe that's some part of the conversation that we need to have with our generation. Maybe we don't want to have.
Okay, but before you go there, Kev, before you put a bow on that one, I got to do something, as Marcia said, I got to do a little pushback on that. So at what point, I got to do a Medea moment. Can I have a Medea moment for a second?
Sure.
At what point do we take some responsibility for where we are and stop blaming our parents and others for what they did and did not do? Because there's a whole lot of things that I could think of that my dad or my mom may not have done the way I needed them to do. But at some point I had to mature and had to look myself in the mirror and say, do I want to repeat that? Do I want to emulate that? Is that where I want to be? Is that what I want to become? And I had to make some decisions concerning things that I wanted in my life. Like, for instance, perfect example, Dad was never there. Dad was absolutely not present whatsoever in my life, my entire life. My brother and I had to make a decision. Do we want to be fathers where we have kids all over the place and we are not present in our kids' life? We're not taking care of our kids. We're not providing for our kids. We're not there to safeguard our kids, protect them from harm, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. We had to make a decision. And I remember my brother and I as teenagers having a conversation and having conversations about the type of fathers we wanted to be, we were going to be. So at what point do you say, yeah, I see the dysfunction. Yeah, I see the issues. Yeah, I see the addictions. Yeah, I see the poverty. I see this, and that, and that, and that. But at what point do we make a decision and take personal responsibility and say, you know what, I reject that. I don't want to be that. And I'm going to do different.
Yeah, and listen, I think we are saying the same thing, but in a different way. And what I would say to you there is you're describing generational curses. Because the reality is exactly right. The reality is that when people are exposed to something good or bad, that's what they know. And unless they make the choice to break what they see, they're going to perpetuate it, right? So you can make the argument that the reason why there's a lot of dysfunction in our relationships in our community is because somebody saw that somewhere. and they probably saw it in a familiar space. And now that person has to make the conscious decision to not do what they saw. And
But
that's
again, break it. So, okay, fine. You saw it. Now break it. What you gonna do? Because see, one of the things I can't stand is when people always point out the problem, but won't give you a solution. They'll come to you with a problem, but they won't come to you with a solution. Or they're able to criticize what they see and not willing to be the change that they want to see. So my thing is, okay, fine. It's a generational curse. Addictions ran rampant in my family. But my mom said, I'm not going to be an alcoholic. Break the generational curse. Poverty ran throughout my family. But I said, I refuse to be poor. Break it. My son would never see a poor day. Why? Because that generational curse was broken. So, I mean, at some point, when do we look in the mirror and take responsibility for what we want to be and where we want to go? We got to take some responsibility. And I'm not talking about as an older person that's in his 50s. I'm talking about as a teenager, I made that decision.
Well, Tom, one of the reasons why you were able to make that decision, and we can make this argument for this generation, is the fact that you had generational curses are not physical things, they're spiritual things. This is
Yes,
where we put the pastors. This is where we put the pastor study back into this, right? You ain't breaking nothing in your family if you don't have a spiritual component to your life.
Correct.
And the reality is that, again, this generation isn't going to church. This generation isn't exposed to the spiritual dynamic of life like we were growing up. So you put that in place. I see some things, I was exposed to some things, but I don't have the spiritual insight or understanding to know how to break this. Then it's going to perpetuate. And so for those who say the church don't matter, ain't no sense of going to church because church is crazy, this is why we talk about church. These are the things that we talk about because it takes God to have to break something in you first to then be strong enough to break what you saw in the course of your life and how you were raised. And that's the part that's missing.
Everything you're saying is correct. Everything you're saying is correct. But can I ask you a question?
Yes.
At 15 years old and 16 years old, I didn't know anything about generational curses.
But you were exposed. Your mother made sure that you were exposed to church.
I didn't know anything about generational curses. And I'm going to say this. I did not know that it was going to take God to help me to be a different man. All I knew is I wanted different. That's the point I'm trying to make. At some point, you have to say, I want different. And then how you work out the different may be a matter of, as you say, you got to have that spiritual component. But all I'm saying is, as a teenager, I didn't know anything about generational curses. And I didn't know anything about, I had no clue that it was a generation curse. All I knew is Dad wasn't there. And I'm not going to be that same person that he was. That's all I knew. So I just made a decision. My brother made a decision. We want different. We will be different. Now, truly, it was God, and he gets 100% of the credit that changed the landscape of our generation and of our bloodline. 100%. So everything you said was 100% on point. 100. But I'm saying, at what point does a person make a decision first to say, I want different? That's all I'm saying.
Sia, you want to answer that? I know you said.
No, I'm just saying, I feel like, and I don't know your whole story, Anton, but I definitely feel like you were exposed to have the experience of knowing that you wanted something different. It's kind of like that. If you're in motion, the only thing that changes it is another force. And so sometimes it's just being exposed to the good in order to want to change to be better. If you're not exposed, or if you don't have the privilege of that type of exposure of something different, then you might not have the insight or awareness. So I think y'all are saying the same thing, but just like somewhere, somehow that shift has to be initiated.
Oh, no, I was exposed. No, you're 100%. You're correct. My mom put us around godly men, throughout our lives. So we saw healthy marriages. We saw men of God who were good fathers, who were good husbands, and who were good supporters, and who were in that community, and they were like coaches and stuff like that. We saw all of that because she was very intentional about putting those type of role models around us. So you're 100% correct in that regards, but we just want it different.
But Tom, that's the point though, because you were exposed. Some kids still like you wanted better. Some kids still like you are angry and frustrated that their dad wasn't around. They just haven't seen better. They haven't been exposed to what is possible because of what they see in their day-to-day. There's not a strong enough support system around them and a spiritual component also that's in their space to show them that, yes, I can take this anger and I can turn it into something better, right? And this goes back to the village, right? This is how the village used to be, because you said it. I saw a coach. I saw people outside of my family. Well, a lot of our kids aren't seeing that anymore. So if all I know is what I know, and all I've seen is what I've seen, where do I go to break that? And in most cases, they don't have an appropriate outlet. So good conversation for today. Okay. Now, see, I want to come to you because, again, we want to, what caught your eye 2022. Now, see, I know you well enough by now to know.
Okay, tell me, what am I saying?
You're going to say something about systems and structures because that's what you do. That's what you do. That's what you operate in, because you believe that the systems and structures is actually what's the root cause of oppression. I think I know you well enough to know that's your angle.
Indeed, big brother. And this particular system that caught my eye was the Supreme Court of the United States this year. And I think a lot of people hearing that are assuming that I'm going to go to the Dobbs decision and how Roe v. Wade was overturned and how medical privacy was put in jeopardy. And that is important. But there was a lesser exposed series of cases that are still pending, but are so important that they're in front of the Supreme Court right now. And one of those, two of them, three of them revolve around voting rights and how we identify as human people. Not a lot of people know right now that Louisiana is trying to get how we define Blackness changed through this Supreme Court. And what's really important about that, when we answer the census, there are a lot of things that happen with that census information. But one of the things with that is how political lines are drawn. So y'all know there are 100 delegates. So you look at the Commonwealth of Virginia, it gets chopped up 100 times in order to get districts. How that is done can draw Black people into power or out of power, depending upon the drawing. So imagine with a lot of the mixed race relationships that we have and the children that are produced through those. So you have some people right now that will check multiple boxes because they have multiple racial identities. Well, Louisiana is trying to say you can only be counted as Black if the only thing you check is Black. Now, if it's Black. Now, if you're hearing it correctly, you would also remember as a student of history that one drop stuff started in the South. So if you had one drop of Black blood, they were like, okay, you can't inherit this money or this power because that one drop makes you over there. So now they're trying to flip the script because the power dynamics have shifted, the demographics have shifted. So now they're trying to undercut the number of people in this world that self-identify as Black to try and undermine our political power. Now, if it works, y'all, these new lines are going to be drawn to the point where our voices will be diluted. And as you know, what happens in one state can happen in other states. So I worked really hard on the Voting Rights Act of Virginia that would make the enterprise discrimination within the enterprise of voting illegal. We have that. But another bill that we passed, I worked with Senator McClellan on it, was a bill that made political and racial and prison gerrymandering illegal. And so if we change the definition of race for the purposes of drawing political lines, Man, y'all, this is detrimental. And so I wanted to lift that up because out of all the things that we talk about politically, if you can't vote and if you can't, when you show up, have a real voice when you vote, all of these other issues that we talk about, justice, about all of the other things, housing and everything, they're at risk because we will not get a representative government. And so the Supreme Court, then there's other cases where they might let the state legislatures decide elections. So, you know, when we vote for president, there's everybody can vote, and then there's the electoral college. Well, this is saying in some instances that instead of what happens in the state by the voters, that the state legislature, the legislative branch can decide who the state is going to vote for in presidential elections. So this is really huge for our political autonomy, our voice, our power, being able to get to the changes that we see fit, being able to overturn systems of oppression. Y'all, this is major.
So do you see this as, that is major, by the way, do you see these subtle shifts and changes for a certain ethnic group to control power?
Yes.
Or do you see this as a way for a certain political party to control power, or both?
Often synonymous. But I will say, to be completely transparent, racial gerrymandering has been used by all political power, by all political parties. But when you are trying to change how an entire people define themselves in order to rig the system, that right now has been solely the Republican Party, specifically right now in the case with Louisiana. But it is the Republicans who know, looking at the numbers, that the only way that they will continue to be able to win is if they undermine populations. And so that's what this is trying to do.
Bishop, what do you say to that, man?
I wrote on some of this way back in the early 90s when Kweisi Mfume was still the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus when it comes down to minority majority districts. Because when you start to look at the population of people, clearly when it comes down to, let's add another layer to this, Sia already mentioned, one layer, one drop of black blood is what would make you black. So when you look at interracial relationships beginning to happening, most young people that are at least through the 60s, 70s, and 80s that were from a biracial mix identified with being blacks. Just by the raw numbers, by the time we get to where we are now, and by 2030 and 2040, I think I wrote on in the Elie Wiesel essay that by the sheer numbers, African Americans will become the dominant population group of citizens in the electoral college process. And this is something that is definitely there to circumvent that, which is to say, Sia, when you come down to the electoral part where the state legislature has to choose whenever there's a runoff, and then just like federally, the Senate begins to kind of cast one vote. How does this augment that or change that? Or does it completely do totally away with that based upon how the district lines are drawn? If I'm interpreting that right.
So one, I just want to say really quickly, and don't forget, if you are Afro-Latino, that's making you pick two, right? So it's not even just white and black. Like don't be Hispanic and black, right? And that's what's going on in Louisiana. When you talk to the people that identify as Afro-Latin or Afro-Latino, they're having to choose. If they know what's at stake, they've already said, we're going to choose black, but you're having them deny half of themselves in order to try and grip onto the political power. But I don't want to conflate the two issues. So one, in drawing the districts, how the states draw them will still be that. So Virginia has the commission. So who does the drawing will still stay the same for all the states. But it is what they are able to legally do that is being interpreted with the Supreme Court. And separate from that, how legislatures might be able to overturn what the popular vote says for a state in the presidential election. Yes, delegates and senators, or in other states, the delegates are called state representatives. They could be able to decide who their electoral votes are going to go toward.
So in that case, why even have a popular vote then? I mean, why would a state?
Exactly. That's why this is so huge. It
Yes.
could completely undo the popular vote. When you're talking about back in the day, one man, one vote, one person, one vote, it would undo that for our presidential election.
Yeah. That's
Major.
that's crazy. That is major. That is major. Bishop, we'll come to you, sir. What caught your eye in 2022?
In keeping right with where Sia is, I'm completely and totally disheartened by the mass shootings that have continued to rampantly take place throughout the United States. And, I wasn't as vocal like I normally would be about the Buffalo shooting. To me, that was more, in my interpretation of it and looking back at it, almost vigilante style, when you have 10 African, you leave from one area. So now there's interstate commerce laws that are there now being affected. You travel to an urban area in particular, and then you just start shooting off and letting off shots. And at some point, we've got to do something about the assault rifles and that ban that needs to take place. That's a legislative action that could happen. But I'm more concerned about the hearts of people and how we have become so desensitized to experiencing this. And I'm right there, since it's the pastor study in Matthew 24, where the heart of many will begin to grow cold and people will become offended with each other. Lawlessness will abound. And I think that we are right in the center of that when we continue to do this. And at the backstop of all of this, greed is really at the center of this. When you come down to these AR-15, 16, 17s, there's no way that you should be able to get 60 rounds off in 25 seconds. It's astronomical. So for me, it's the mass shootings, and I don't know what else is going to take in America for this to stop. On the one end, people's hearts have got to change. On the other end, politically, we've got to have the will to say enough is enough.
So, yeah, and I agree with that. And Ton and Sia, I want to ask you both, how do we have a conversation that like this? Because, guns is such a politically divisive subject, right? And it just seems like you can't even have a conversation about the issue without people immediately choosing sides about which party that they support. Do you ever imagine that there could be a day where there can be common sense gun reform in our country where, I know both sides will never get everything that they want, but do you actually see a day that potentially could happen? See, I'll start with you.
So I think the thing that's holding it up is within political parties, legislators are kept within our bounds by party rules. And so within the Democratic Party, there might be an allowance for diversity of thought. So if you think of like some of the senators and me, we are worlds apart, but we're both Democrats and we're allowed to do and vote the ways that we think are best. What I'm hearing behind the scenes from some of my Republican colleagues is they cannot vote for anything that their leaders say that they can't vote for. And so even if there might be a Republican who had lost a loved one to gun violence and wants to do something, even if they don't want to do my whole agenda, they want to do something, they could be punished if they vote on a Democratic bill. So it is going to take courage from everyone to do the right thing despite the rules, and for us to give up the sense of continuing our power. Because if God put me in this position, it's not mine. The responsibility to act in a certain way is mine, but this position is the people's. And so if I'm not doing the best for the people, then I'm here just for power. And so until more people decide that they want to represent their districts as opposed to being there for their own power, we're going to be stuck in this because they're going to have to buck the system in order to do what's right.
And Todd, you see it all day, every day, the violence and the gun issue. As a Commonwealth attorney, if you were standing in front of the legislature, what would you ask for that may be helpful to you as you got to prosecute all these cases that oftentimes involve guns?
So, to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't want to stand before the legislators. I would want to stand before the Supreme Court, because regardless of whatever they pass, many of those laws will probably be overturned. Because look at New York. New York passed quite a number of very progressive gun laws, and the Supreme Court overturned them. And so it's now it's gone beyond now the legislators to pass certain common sense approaches. Even with Bishop speaking about the ban on the assault rifles. I'm sorry, Bishop, but as far as I'm concerned right now, as long as the composition of the Supreme Court is what it is, I think I'm certain you will not get a ban on the assault rifles. And if so, it's going to get overturned based on Second Amendment violations. So it goes now beyond just the state legislators at this point. You have to, we need some Supreme Court justices who are going to be able to get beyond the politics. And unfortunately, the last three justices that were picked by the former president are deeply entrenched in partisan decision making.
So then let's say you're before the Supreme Court now, and you're as a Commonwealth attorney that's in a city that you see violence and you prosecute cases. What to you would be considered common sense gun reform that would work for your, at least for Hampton? You can only speak for your city.
Well, again, truthfully, I tend not to waste my breath when I know already that it's a waste of time. But since we're doing radio and we're doing this live Zoom, then I'll do this Facebook and everything. I'll do it for you. But I really believe that it doesn't matter what I say at this point. They have an agenda, and they have a very, very conservative agenda, and they're going to stick to that agenda. Like Marcia said earlier about even the party politics with the GOP, if they march as a single voice. And we're seeing now a Supreme Court like never before in history march with a single voice when it comes to certain conservative agendas. And they're led by Scalia and they're led by Thomas. And so it doesn't matter what you say. I don't care who you put in front of them. It's not going to matter. But what I would say is universal background checks. I would say a ban on assault weapons. I would definitely say raise the age of individuals who can get certain firearms. I would start just there by itself. Not being able to purchase with so many firearms within a 30-day period, I would start there as well. So there are some common sense approaches that I think most Americans would agree on those items. However, again, it's not going to matter because we have an extremely partisan Supreme Court, and it would not matter what you say at this point.
So for the purposes of radio, what, Sia, would you say to somebody that says, AR-15s aren't the leading cause of most gun deaths? It's stolen guns, or it's guns that are been illegally obtained. It's not the legal person who goes to the store that is doing it the right way that's in most cases causing these particular crimes. It's the ones who obtain guns illegally and all that. What do you say to that person in terms of when you're trying to, legislate gun reform?
Yeah, so honestly, I think, Ton is right. Like that might just be an exercise in futility. But where I had hoped to get some buy-in from those on both sides of the aisle is funding prevention. So changing the hearts and minds of our children before they even get the gun in their hand. And so that is economic security. That is housing security. That is food security. That is tutors in school. That is making sure that all of our children are on a trajectory where it seems silly to pick up a gun. It's teaching them how to have conflict resolution to a point where you can talk things out. And that isn't idealistic or revolutionary. That is getting back to some of the things that were happening in previous generations, where a fight was a fight and then you move on. But I also think that, that's my line of work, getting the budget funded in ways that we can put significant amounts of money. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars toward that. And then I would want, if I'm on my other side, to be in front of the church and ask for church leaders to do more with our youth. If I can be honest, it was me being involved in church and wanting to be involved in these things that helped me make better decisions. And so if we could find a way to get the kids more involved, if we could find a way to make church more welcoming to younger voices, I think that would be a great case for gun violence prevention as well.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting conversation. Maybe we can pick up on in 23. How can the church be in the lead of gun reform, not just a solution. Yeah, we got a little bit of time left. Jay, last but not least, sir, 2022, what caught your eye, man?
Brooklyn pastor who was robbed while preaching, charged with wire fraud and lying to the FBI in an unrelated case. I wanted to talk about this during summertime, but we could not get to it. And now in the last few minutes of 2022, we have some time to talk about Reverend Dr. Bishop Lamar Whitehead. His church was robbed during the summertime. Feel bad for him. Stuff he said happened. If it happened the way he said it was terrible. But now all these flashy videos and saying all this stuff and suing all the media for defamation. Sir, you're a man of God. Just stay there. You're a man of God. And you didn't lie just to the police. You didn't lie to the crosswalk guard. You didn't lie to the Commonwealth of New York. You lied to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's like your mama and your daddy. When your mama and daddy ask you a question, they already know the answer. Mama said, Jason, were you running after church and I had a big hole in my white church pants with a green grass stain? I said, Mama, they made me do it. I knew she knew, but I couldn't tell her the whole truth. He knew, the FBI knew, but the bishop, the man of God, lied to the Federal Bureau. Cut your camera back on Bishop Charlie. We're going to take this year out with a bang. Not just holes in the pulpit, liars and cheaters. I feel my help.
So for those who may not be familiar with the story, let's just go back. Earlier in the summer, what's his name? Bishop Whitehead?
Bishop Lamar Whitehead.
He's a bishop of a church in New York, and there was a live video stream of his church being robbed during a Sunday morning service. And obviously, allegedly, yes. And so this sparked a lot of response and reaction. We did a show on it. And so now, this bishop, church is very small in number, no disrespect to that, but what he wears, and he's got a Rolls Royce SUV, and this lifestyle seemingly does not match or reflect being a pastor of a church of the congregation size that he has.
Pause it right there. Pause it right there. Pause it right there. So what I would say to criminals as the Commonwealth attorney, don't attract us to you by your lifestyle. If you're going to be out there slinging and ringing and doing all other kind of stuff, don't show it to us and put yourself on blast with what you're wearing, what you're driving, where you're living, and how you eating. I'm just saying. You go ahead and take the floor.
He also said don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't start it. Don't do it. But if you do it,
But let's be equal. With the time we have left, the bishop said that he got his money from real estate. That's what he said.
Okay.
No, he didn't. Anyway, let me be quiet.
So Bishop Ray, from one bishop to the other, you got the floor, sir.
First of all, y'all have just jacked me up with this. We try to figure out among the bishopric, among those of us who are legitimately consecrated bishops, we try to figure out who laid hands on him. We still can't figure that out right there. And much of this money, I'm trying to stay behind the veil with this, Kev, and that is let's just go to the first video with the person that was sitting in the chair. You and I know if you've got aides and armor bearers, something happens to the pastor, they the first line of defense. Every church I've been in, served in, been a part of, you not making it past the front row because you're gonna get tackled. Okay. That person is sitting there. It's alleged that could be part of some kind of fraud, and he's got a history of that. We don't know who this cat is, and can't nobody really claim him. So that's the best way I can say.
Well, again, for those who don't know, he did allege that
you're wrong, Jason.
This robbery at his church on a live stream on Sunday morning, that there was allegedly several $100,000s worth of jewelry that was stolen. Is that correct, Bishop?
Hundreds of thousands of jewelry, and just to the point, we don't even wear our jewelry like that unless we are doing ceremonial sacerdotal duties. This cat is just
stop using big words. Just say ceremonies. Just say
communion, communion, marriages, and baptism.
Yeah. This is red meat, Bishop. We got nothing to say on this. We're gonna end the year being in silence.
We gotta clean it up.
Because Jay, Todd, and Sia is after us, and if Alvia was here, boy,
I'm
Lord.
so glad she's not here.
Well, listen, we after you? I'm just saying.
Oh, let's hold on. All joking aside, the men and women that are here have high levels of integrity, high levels of character. Like, no, all joking aside, I play a lot, but Dr. Swan, Bishop Johnson, Anton, I want to call you Dr. Bell. You need to go back and get your degree. And then you got Marcel.
I got a JD, Jay.
Oh, with
I'm a JD.
Dr.
Yes,
Bell. Dr. Bell.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Don't come for me.
Okay.
Don't come for me in 2020.
Okay, I'm just wanting to know. I'm a JD. I'm a JD.
But what I was saying was,
at 25, I was a JD. Okay.
All right. Go barbershop.
He went barbershop. No, but even Dr. Lion, all of y'all have high levels of integrity. So let's not get that twisted. Ain't nobody slipping and sliding up here. But your counterparts, wondering why they can't find peace, wondering why they can't find happiness. You want to know why? They can't hide. Andre Cross gave me that song. You can't hide. You can't hide. We out of time.
Listen, everybody, have a great and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. On that note, we got to run. Come check us out in 2023. We'll be back prayerfully with some better shows. Until next time, be blessed to be a blessing to someone else. Happy New Year, everybody. This is Smooth 88.1 WHOV iHeartRadio right here, y'all, on Facebook Live.